This Ag News Update brought to you by American Implement, indebted to the past, committed to the future. In a moment, K-State's Glynn Tonser.
Day and night, till the job is done, Teeter is the one that works for you. Fields of green, reaching toward the sun, Teeter is the one that works for you. Teeter is the one, Teeter is the one that works for you. Teeter Irrigation, your source for water management.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception: keeping electricity affordable.
Wheatland Electric, delivering energy for life, your Touchstone Energy Cooperative.
And joining us now, Dr. Glenn Tonser, a ag economist, a beef livestock economist, actually kind of a specialist at K-State. And we wanted to bring him back as a few weeks ago we kind of talked as we were learning more. Now we even know more. And Dr. Tonser, you and your colleagues have done a lot of analysis on the impact that COVID-19 has had on the protein sector. What were some of your findings, at least as we know it right now?
Yeah, and I'll start very broad and answer that question. We can do a deep dive into specific versions on the kind of the back end of this. But I think it's important to do a quick timeline of the major shocks that drives these impacts, and then we can get into the numbers. It seems like a long time ago for most of us, but I'll remind us the first shock was in the month of March. We started shutting down states. So that's when the stay-at-home type orders across the country at different points of time came in place. The relevance of that for the protein space was we had a big shift in our food consumption patterns. So we started consuming our food largely at home. So demand for food through grocery stores and the retail channel was boosted. Meanwhile, demand for food through restaurants and food service declined. In the protein space, that's really important because not all beef, not all pork, not all chicken is equal. We don't send each product equally through the different market channels. I use high-end steak as an example that's more prevalent through white tablecloth sit-down restaurants as a percentage of the volume we normally consume. And conversely, ground beef is something that consumers are a little more comfortable preparing at home, personal ingredient. On the pork space, bacon, 2/3 of it normally is consumed in the food service channel, 1/3 at home. Those kind of not 50-50 realities threw a lot of shocks in the protein system just because we started staying at home. So that's largely the effects that occurred in March and the first half of April, let's say. But as April progressed, then the bottleneck in the industry developed. And this is where the general public took even greater note of the livestock and meat industry. And the bottleneck was our challenges in harvesting animals and converting them into edible meat products. So taking cattle and hogs, running them through processing and packing facilities, and producing a whole suite of beef and pork products became more of a challenge. A number that gives real context to this was the last week of April. Both species were running about 40% below the same period the year earlier. So a real simple way to think about this is we were running about 60% of our desired capacity, and both industries entered the year with lots of animals. We entered into this whole story planning to produce a lot of protein. So a backlog of animals very quickly developed, lots of discussion around euthanization, backing them up in feedlots, lots of that commentary. And meanwhile, lots of commentary on the volume and variety mix of meat products that consumers had available was changing pretty quick. So through the month of May, the term of quote unquote shortage was floating around, and I was doing my best to put context on the shortage can be misleading because there's no shortage of animals. Our ability to produce protein has been temporarily hit largely in the month of May, and we've had a lot of improvements since then. Time Magazine and the like took note of this, just to give some context. The general public took note of this. It was no longer just a livestock producer and packer processor interchain discussion. All of society took note of the changes that happened to our meat production system. Those are the two big shocks that happened, and they're not small shocks. Each of them have major effects on the meat and livestock markets. And at the end of the day, just before we get buried in numbers, is those collectively depressed livestock prices and elevated wholesale meat prices. And we're still seeing higher retail prices follow after that, but we're already seeing lower wholesale prices. And I could break that down more if we need to. But some of the massive shocks that were already in play have worked their way through the marketplace for the most part in the wholesale meat place, and we're still seeing some of that ebb towards the consumer.
Dr. Glenn Tonser, K-State beef ag economist, is our guest. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more in just a moment.
Would you like to see something done about high gas prices and low unemployment? Western Plains Energy in Campus, Kansas is doing something about it. They're a proud part of Growth Energy, America's ethanol supporters, and they employ 38 people and will be adding more following the expansion. Ethanol fuel not only reduces the cost of regular gasoline, it's good for the environment and keeps money right here in the United States while supporting local rural jobs. Western Plains Energy, doing something for the future.
SNS Trailer Sales, with 2 locations in Ness City, Kansas, is where everybody goes to buy or rent trailers. They feature the all-new, all-aluminum Mauer grain trailer with all of the electric options, the easy-to-load detached trailers, and a huge stock of header trailers. At the west location, you'll find bumper poles, goosenecks, and oilfield specialty trailers, along with flat and utility beds for pickups. SNS Trailer Sales in Ness City and on the web, but remember, you do have to spell out the "and."
And our guest is Dr. Glenn Tonser, a beef livestock economist at Kansas State. And Glenn, as most people are aware of, a few weeks ago, those high prices, we were seeing on the box beef cutout values, and the margin from what a producer was receiving to what the packer margin was over the last now several days. We have seen those go down anywhere from 8, 10, 15, some days almost $20 decline. Are we slowly or very kind of making big leaps to get back to what we normally would expect?
So I'll speak specifically to the wholesale beef values. Talking about margins in the industry is a different discussion, and we can do that in length or find my webinars on that on agmanager.info. But the wholesale beef market has certainly been quote unquote volatile. So we were a little over $200 for choice beef cutout back in the middle of March, and we got all the way up to $470 and change here about the middle of May. And then sitting here talking to you now, we're the 10th, 11th of June, that period, not too many weeks later, we're at about $240. So large increase from March to May and a very quick decline from the middle of May to the middle of June. And direction-wise, that is not surprising to analysts like me. So again, 40% reduction in the ability to harvest cattle and produce beef at the end of April, and more generally just a backlog throughout the month of April and May developing, hammered our ability to produce beef products. Meanwhile, some particular products, especially on the ground channel throughout April and May, were in high demand by consumers. All the discussion about hoarding and so forth. So you had a demand pull and a supply constraint, both pulling up that price. And then add to it more recently, let's say on the second half of May and as we go into June, more and more restaurants across this country are trying to open up, which is a really good story because food service activity has started to pick up. I hope that continues, but that's yet another new source of demand for those products. So it's really important to appreciate their supply and demand components to that whipsawing of the choice beef cutout. But to answer your question, paraphrase it, we had a big run up and we pulled most of it back down. We're within $30 of where we were in the middle of March on the choice beef cutout.
Dr. Glenn Tonser, a K-State livestock economist, has joined us. Stay with us. We'll have more coming up.
Wulfgar Construction and Irrigation has been around a long time, and a lot of folks have trusted them to design, build, and service all sizes of commercial and on-farm storage for grain and equipment. Wulfgar is also known for their outstanding irrigation division, where they stock a complete selection of nozzles, regulators, drops, gear drives, electrical, and structure components. Looking for an electric motor? Wulfgar has a large selection in single and 3-phase. Next time, reach out to the pros who have decades of experience at taking care of business the right way. Wulfgar Construction and Irrigation. When you've had a best friend for over 50 years, you develop a trust. And the Scot Co-op has been a trusted rural friend since 1957. A co-op keeps money in the area, doing business for and with their members. And that helps keep their hometown thriving with keeping money in the community. Scot Co-op is not just an elevator. It's the rural way of doing business. So, when you see an elevator, remember your friends at Scot Co-op.
Well, 1030 KBUF brings you agriculture information every day, beginning just a little bit after 6 o'clock. We'll run all the way through the closing markets. You can follow along on Facebook and Twitter as well. I'm Ken Rogers. Thanks for watching.